Good evening, everybody. So, greetings from the English Without Borders. And today we are very glad to see all of you. And we are hosting Roni Medrano, who will be talking about right writing, enhancing writing skills for your TEFL class. And welcome, Roni. Nice to see you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh, and good morning to you, right? So we have time difference. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, welcome to English Without Borders. And let me just introduce Roni. Roni Medrano has been working as an EFL teacher since 2009. He holds a BA in English language teaching for EFL settings. In 2018, he got a Fulbright scholarship to study a master's in TESOL at St. Michael's College in Vermont, USA. His studies reviewed elements of teacher identity and ground theory. His areas of interest are teacher identity, call and teaching reading, and writing using technology. When he's not teaching, he will very likely be playing with his little puppy Frida. So, Ronnie, so happy to see you. And now the floor is yours. Dear
Okay.
participants, please use your chance to leave your questions in the chat box. And those who are watching us on Facebook, use your questions in the comment box. So after the presentation of Ronnie, we'll be just passing the questions over to Ronnie to respond to them. Thank you very much. Ronnie, the floor is yours.
All right. All right. Well, I think I should say good evening in for the side of the world that you are in Tajikistan or any other part of the world where you're watching us. So I just have to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Okay. I know that this project it's definitely growing up, and I was just telling the organizer, the people who are organizing this, that I feel very happy to see very talented women who are carrying out this project, definitely, and that's something that makes me feel very happy, especially right now in times that we know that there are difficult things happening around the world, but I definitely celebrate that along with them. So I know that the topic is definitely something that might be very catchy. I hope that just to be, like just to make justice to the things that I will present today, and definitely feel free to write something on the chat, or maybe add your reaction or your favorite emoticon to this, because definitely it's about writing, and it's probably one of the skills that, at least from my perspective, it's a little bit difficult to keep track of, especially in certain settings when our students are probably concentrating or focusing on other skills. We know that in most classes, or a lot of our students probably want to speak over maybe writing. Okay, so that's probably one of the reasons why we tend to forget about this skill. But definitely we all want to have a balanced we all want to have students with balanced skills, and definitely that's when the writing comes up. um but before starting this, I don't know, guys, if you know where El Salvador is. So I just want to introduce myself again. I'm from El Salvador. El Salvador is that teeny tiny country that you get to see over there. Um, so as you can see, it is the smallest country in all the American continent. I guess that now there are others that are maybe a tad smaller than El Salvador, but as you can see, that very tiny piece of land, 21,000 square kilometers, if I'm not mistaken. I hope that my social studies teacher is not here, because he's going to probably throw a piece of chalk right on into my head. So that's the El Salvador. Okay, that teeny tiny red spot that you see over there. I know that when it comes to geography, sometimes our memory fails on us a little bit. So for you to understand it, you can also see where Central America is over there. Okay, so Central America is this very small belt if we want to call it like that, or strip that joins North America and South America. Okay, so that's where, of course, Central America is. Okay, so Central America is a group of very small countries. All of us are very together, or very close to each other, and our traditions, even the language that we all speak, it's very similar. Accent, however, is something that changes, and we all speak Spanish. Okay, so I can also say hola to all of you. And then about my experience, well, as Nasiba said, well, I'm kind of a middle school child. If I want to compare the age that I have teaching, okay, because it's been approximately some good 10 to 12 years teaching, and as a middle school child, probably I'm kind of a rebellious boy. I was a Fulbright. I was a Fulbright grantee. Okay, just last year, I came back to my country, and I had the chance to meet Gulnara, who's one of the of the women leading this project as well. Right now in my country, I'm a teacher trainer, so I'm mostly working with students who want to become teachers too, who want to go to public schools and start teaching. And something that definitely catches my attention is everything related to teacher identity. Okay, when it comes about that, I'm definitely passionate about it. I definitely love reading things about grounded theory, identity transformation, and all this stuff. Okay, how a person, you know, transitions from being a student to becoming a teacher, and how does it feel? How do they experience this process? It's something that definitely catches my attention. Okay, so I actually wrote a thesis about that too when I graduated from St. Michael's College. But anyways, people, I just have a disclaimer about my presentation. And the first thing is that, well, it's proved work, but it's been only proved by me. Okay, so I know it sounds very maybe selfish, or maybe a little silly just to say this, but I know that you're very experienced teachers too, and I know that you will definitely you know, like adapt it to your own setting and add changes. Okay, you're always welcome to do it, people. I know that this is not written on stone. Okay, it's not stone carved, so you can definitely add the changes that suit you best. Okay, then I know that you all have very specific needs in your classroom. Okay, I know that your students are your students, and you know, with all the things that they have, with all the flaws and with all the virtues that they have, so you know them better. So in case that you get to see an activity that needs some adaptation to your very specific needs, go ahead. And this is not definite work, of course, right? So this is just a couple of things that I have found, you know, like that I have read about, and they have proved to be very useful for the kind of students that I have. I've been teaching a writing course, an academic writing course, and I have proved some of this with them, and also I have proved some of this techniques or implementations with another class that's mostly an English conversational level, but they're also focusing or they also have a minor on academic writing. Okay, so before continuing, what time do you think it is here? Really quickly, if you can write it on the chat, that would be better. Okay. And by the way, the picture that you get to see over there, it's a very emblematic landmark in El Salvador. Okay, so I just want to check the chat over here. It's 6 a.m. Okay, it's 8 in the morning, somebody says. 7:30. Okay, actually right now it's 7:09 here. So there's I think there's an 11-hour difference, okay, compared to Tajikistan. So definitely it's very early here. But I was just telling the Nasiba and Gulnara that I usually wake up very early here because I have to commute. Today I just asked for a permission to be here with you. Okay, so, and let's see, let's continue with this. So I just have a quick question for you guys. Were you teaching online before the pandemic started? Were you teaching online before the pandemic started? I know that the pandemic is definitely something that changed our lives, okay, for the better or for the worse. I'm not sure. I hope that it was for the better, but never. Okay, so a lot of you are saying no. Somebody says never. Yeah, and I guess this was a very sudden change, right? This definitely was a very sudden change. I think no one was prepared for this, of course, right? I wasn't prepared for this, honestly. I had taught already a few courses online, but I mean, like kind of in a hybrid mode, like having some tasks online, some other tasks carried out, face to face in the classroom. But I was never doing something fully online before this started. Okay, so I guess this was a lot of stress, a great deal of stress for a lot of us maybe, and definitely I think no one could say that was 100% ready for this type of events. Okay, we didn't even know how our students were going to cope with all the things that we have to do in the classroom, and certainly when it comes to writing, that makes it even more complicated because we never know how our students are going to cope up sorry, how our students are going to cope with writing in these settings. Okay, and as you know really well, when we're in the classroom, there are a lot of things and a lot of techniques that we actually implement, like probably monitoring, like probably checking right on spot. And I'm not saying that technology doesn't do that, but it feels like a little bit impersonal by times, right? So it's very important to humanize the the this component into writing and making, and you have to make sure that your students are actually engaged with all the things that you're carrying out in the classroom, especially when it comes to writing. I also have another question for you, and that is, have you ever taught writing in any of its possible means, whether it is, I don't know, fully online, flipped classroom, blended learning? Have you done something about that? Do you have some sort of experience, at least teaching writing, maybe in remote settings? So some of you are saying no, and then again, it's exactly the same scenario for a lot of us, and for me too. Okay, I had never taught a writing course fully online, and it feels, again, it feels so, I don't know, sometimes you get to have like the imposter syndrome, like what am I doing here? Bring the teacher to control the situation, and then you just remind yourself, oh, I'm the teacher, I'm the one who's supposed to be controlling all this, and to have all things under control, to have all things um, you know working just like a clock. It's definitely difficult. And then what kind of students do I have, and what are their writing needs? So this is another question that you need to think about. Okay, so what are the kind of students that you have? Are you teaching adults? Are you teaching children? Are you teaching, I don't know, students who are going to travel to the United States maybe, or to any other English speaking country, or students who are preparing for a standardized test, whether it is TOEIC, TOEFL, IELTS? Okay, I had a okay, Seboniso. Uh, I'm I I'm really sorry if I cannot pronounce your names correctly. People, bear with me, please. So Seboniso says, I had an online course, but I had never taught online before the pandemic. So yeah, that happened to a lot of us, right? That's true. I also had a few online classes while I was in the United States, and of course that took place before the pandemic. Okay, so but nothing like teaching fully online. That was complicated. Okay, so why is writing so difficult? And this is something that we need to keep in mind, okay? Um, well, first of all, because, you know, writing actually has a lot of purposes. And sometimes it's very difficult just to have our students write something if they don't really know the purpose why they're writing for. Um, whether it is persuasive, whether it is, you know, uh, a description or something like that, it it definitely has a purpose. And when we're actually teaching writing, sometimes we get to forget it. Okay, now when it comes to writing specifically for maybe a conversational English level in which your students are there just to get the basics of all four skills, definitely it's sometimes kind of allowed for you to forget about the purpose, but it's definitely something that we need to keep in mind. Okay, whenever it's possible, just to remind our students or to let them know, okay, you're doing this because you want to convince an audience or because you're going to um, describe a process. Then productive skills require more creativity, Gulnara says. That's true. That's true. Okay. And, you know, sometimes we have very creative students, but when it comes to writing, their creativity seems to, you know, like dim out and it doesn't shine. And that's definitely one of the caveats about writing. But writing certainly has other, you know, like a positive side, that writing allows you to, you know, sit down, think about the things that you're going to write about and then just do it. So there are like positive and negative side about that. And of course, people, writing requires many processes. Okay, so the planning, then the drafting, then the first revision, then a lot of things that you have to do. Okay, and then the final product that your students submit. It's definitely lots of steps. And the problem is that sometimes where our students don't have the clarity about what to do in each of these steps. Okay, and of course there are many genders. There are many genders in writing. Okay, so and that's all of these points are pointed out by Harmer in his book How to Teach English. Okay, so definitely, let's see. Okay, so one of the weakest spot in writing, something that I've noticed, is that sometimes our students have ideas and they're very creative. Definitely um, they're definitely very brilliant. But what happens is that they're not able to, you know, put some shape to those ideas. It's just a bunch of things that they have. Okay, a lot of you know, like kind of a scrapbook. Okay, that you get to stick everything that's very relevant to you, but there isn't a concrete idea that your audience might understand. Okay, because if I get to grasp someone's scrapbook, okay, I get to see a lot of, you know, scraps and things that this student has probably cut out from magazines, newspapers, etc. But what's like the, you know, meaning that it has for an audience? So the same happens when it comes to writing. Our students might have very brilliant ideas, especially if it's a creative writing class. But the problem is that how are you going to articulate all those ideas in a written form so that your audience will be able to understand it? And that's, again, you know, a question that sends us back to square one. How are we going to add ideas, or how are we going to shape those ideas into something that's readable for an audience? So what I have seen, or what I have spotted, is that if students have difficulties writing at the lowest possible level, which is the sentence, then they very much are unable to shape their ideas. Okay, so to me, what matters before going over, okay, writing effective essays, writing compelling thesis statements and stuff like that, we definitely need to sit down with our students, at least in remote settings, of course, right? We're not really sitting down next to them, at least not here in El Salvador. I'm not quite sure if if it's the case of Tajikistan, but we're still teaching remotely, okay? But anyways, we still need to, you know, sit down, whatever that means in the in your setting, and then making sure that our students are definitely shaping their ideas correctly and making sure that they are articulated all the way to the lowest level, which is the sentence. So, and I think that's the reason why there's no need for us to remember that it, you know, it's a small unit. It's a, and it has many teeny tiny defective points at which our students can fail, whether it is, oh yeah, the subject is not there, or oops, it seems that you forgot to conjugate this verb and it's third person singular, don't you remember? Or I mean, before doing all of these things, we need to remember that definitely writing, it might be a little difficult, and definitely there are a lot of caveats when it comes to writing. That's why making sure that our students are writing, you know, effective sentences is something that we have to procure in the classrooms. And something that I have also seen is that whenever you're just working with your students, whenever you're having them work on their writing skills for sentences, it's something that you usually get to do right on the spot. Now, it's also important to remember and to take into consideration that we are all busy teachers. We are all under a lot of pressure. We have thousands and thousands of papers to check, exams to design, lesson plans to produce. So I know all of that. And I know that sometimes, especially when we have very large classes, it gets very difficult just to go and check, I don't know, a stack of 20, 25 papers. And you know, the students actually submitted that 2 weeks ago. So it's already past the deadline for me, right? So it gets very difficult. So it's also very important that whenever we're just making sure that our students are writing, you know, right sentences, you're doing that right on spot. You're doing it during class time. You're doing it right after the student wrote it. In some cases, of course, when it's possible, students might bring some homework, and then, or might take some homework, and then they have to solve it. They have to, you know, bring it back already with something produced already. So that's another consideration. But whenever it comes to, you know, correcting sentences or writing correct sentences, that's something that you can 90% of the times do in the classroom. Now, let's get down to business. The first kind of technique that I want to show, unfortunately, we won't be able to work in breakout rooms or anything like that. But the first one is write sentences with a new word. Okay, so this is super important because sometimes we just bring to the classroom, I don't know, like a bank of 20, 25 new expressions or 20, 25 new words, whether they are nouns, verbs, etc. But when are they going to have a chance to utilize those 20, 25 words? That's a reason why you need to consider, okay, I definitely want to have my students write sentences and using new vocabulary as well. Here, of course, you can also use or make use of other tools like maybe Corpus, the COCAG website, in case that you want to check how these words appear in the real world and how they are utilized. For example, that's something that you still need to consider. But here, when it comes to write sentences with a new word, there are two sides, okay? And you will pretty much get to see this layout, okay? I have a positive or plus sign over there and then the minus sign, okay? So the positive side about this is that students get to write sentences. So you will get to see this, yeah, Freyer model, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's true, Natia. So students get to write sentences, okay? They're writing that. And now I just want to clarify here that it's also important that at least when students are practicing, don't feel obligated to, you know, not punish your students, but don't feel obligated to take points out of the sentences that students are writing, because here you're not quite like correcting and becoming this grammar Nazi, okay? Here, what you want is to have students write a sentence, okay? To have students write sentences, and certainly students will commit mistakes, definitely, okay? They will commit, in some cases, very blatant mistakes, or in some cases, mistakes that are very kind of difficult to spot, but they're still mistakes that are not fully accepted in academic writing. However, it's important to let your students go and write, whether they're correct or not, but as long as they're sentences and they're able to at least identify like the basic elements in the things that they're writing, okay? Another important thing about this is that students feel control over the topic, okay? So it's super important, and you'll get to see it in a few minutes. I will just go to the next slide, but it's super important that you have to let your students feel the control, okay, of the things that they're writing down. And that's something that we sometimes forget. We just assign a lot of things that they have to do, but it's only about maybe topics or things that they definitely don't feel passionate about. Instead, when you present just a list of words and you let your students, okay, go ahead, write about whatever you want, as long as you use 2 to 5 words out of this word bank. That's definitely something that helps. And it's also important, guys, that you keep practicing grammar and you also include vocabulary in it. So with this type of activities, especially if in a word bank, you include words, or you include lexical items that belong to different categories, that's better, okay? So you mix up nouns with adjectives, with verbs, that definitely helps. And again, you also have to give some freedom to your students. So let them go and puzzle themselves using maybe a dictionary, okay? That will definitely improve indirectly their research skills, okay? It's not quite free writing, Natia, because you'll get to see it. You'll get to see what I usually do with this type of activities. Okay, so it's not quite fully free writing, but it's, let's say, semi-free, semi-controlled type of writing. Yeah, and then the time is usually something that you need to consider. Okay, so is it easy to assign? Definitely it is, because all you need to do is just to prepare a bank of questions and then bring it to the class. Now, the negative side about this, people, is that students can make lots of errors. They will, actually. They have to. And it might be very hard to correct this type of paper. Let's imagine that you have, I don't know, let's imagine that you have 20 students and you tell your students, okay, guys, so what you have to do is to write 15 sentences. If you multiply 20 times 15, that's going to be a lot of sentences that probably you don't have time to check. If we don't correct, okay, hold on. That's something that I want to tell you later, okay? I'll go over that. And then the scoring time might be a little bit difficult. Now, the way that I get to do it, it's this. So this is just an example. So what you have to do is you bring a bank of questions similar to the one that you get to see over here. I just got this one from any random book, okay? And then what they have to do is just, okay, pick 5 words, no more, 5 words. Make sure that they are from different categories, okay? Not just verbs or adjectives, but different categories, okay? But 5 words. And with those 5 words, I want you to write sentences, 5 sentences. In some cases, people, you'll be surprised that some students will actually use 2 words for a sentence, okay? So that happens because I know that you know it too, that sometimes we have mixed ability classrooms or students who probably have better writing skills, okay? Also, what I normally do with this is that, okay, since it's a little bit difficult to correct all of the sentences, why don't you add a circle to the one sentence that you want to steer my direction my attention towards. All right, so my students usually circle, let's say, a sentence, let's say number 3, okay? So they usually circle that, and then they're telling me, teacher, this is the one in which I'm actually, putting all my effort towards. So I want you to get to read this sentence. That's what I normally tell them, okay? And then I usually check it. I definitely add some correction, and I also make sure that the correction that I add over that sentence is not coded with, for example, I don't know, word choice. So I write WC, or then one of those symbols that we usually draw over words that might be missing. Because if we just, utilize maybe a 2-page code explanation, that's a lot of information that our students won't really know how to put into practice their correct writing skills. So this is something that I get to do, and I assure you people, students definitely enjoy this type of activities. Again, the positive side about this is, as it says here, students feel the control of that, okay? But it's a little difficult, especially if you have large classes, to make sure that you're checking everyone's work. That sometimes becomes a little complicated. But this is the this is the first one, okay, that I'm going to present here. Then the second one, again, the positive and negative side, okay? So write a sentence with a collocation. So I think that we all have seen collocations. They're very important. They're definitely lexical items that are sometimes very difficult to deal with. And what happens is that our students don't really know where to place them. And these are very puzzling too, okay? So once again, the positive side about this, and I will get to show you how I do it in the next slide, okay? So students are writing sentences, okay? That's it. Now, students think about what comes before and after the collocation. So if you analyze this, then this becomes a little bit more related to critical thinking. What's the one word that I have to write here after this word or before this word? Okay, so for example, you have, let's say, a dozen, okay, a dozen roses, a dozen eggs, stuff like that. So what is that word that follows that? And sometimes it's very surprising just to see that in some cases, like when students are using a dozen, they're actually adding the preposition of, and this is one of those exceptions in which you don't use it, okay? So students definitely have to pay close attention to that. You have to bring a lot of examples as well, but it's super important that students start utilizing their critical thinking skills. This technique, writing sentences with collocations, is definitely one of those techniques that will allow you to have your students start critically thinking about the things that they're writing and becoming aware writers too. And with this type of activities, people, you have to be very careful, because maybe this is just for a more advanced class. Okay, so they have to practice more difficult vocabulary in an original sentence. So this specific point right here, I just want to use the laser. Okay, so this specific point right here might be kind of a double-edged sword, and you have to be very careful, because I know that we're not all teaching advanced English classes, okay, so, or super academic writing classes. So we need to be very careful whenever we're just carrying out this, because this positive point here could definitely go to this side if we don't know the way to administer it, or how to dose it for the type of students that we have. However, it's again kind of easy to assign. It's not as easy as the previous one, because the previous one is just very isolated items that you utilize. And then again, people, here I'm not really discussing how to use maybe Google Forms, how to use Google Docs, or Padlet, or anything like that, because I just want to leave this to you, and then you adapt it to your own context, okay? Whether you're using Google Docs or Padlet or Mentimeter or stuff like that, it's all your call, okay? So here it's just, I just leave you with the things that I do. I usually implement them with Padlet or any other free resource, because we don't have original licenses to use, or we don't have paid licenses to use other type of tools. But I just want to leave that for you, okay? Adaptable to any kind of context that you have. And then the negative side about this, people, is that students can make a lot of errors once again, but it's also important, people, that they make them, because here you're not really, or you're not fully criticizing that a lot. Let me just check the chat here. Oh, no, I thought that the chat had a new message. And then again, for this type of activities, it might be a little bit harder to correct this type of paper, or to correct this type of activities, okay? The scoring time, it's another difficulty, or another caveat that you might have. So I just want you to take into consideration that, okay? You have the positive side, you have the negative side. Probably if you have a very large class, this type of activity might not be fully convenient for you, or you probably reduce the number of sentences. You just make 1-2 sentences for your students to check. Again, circling the sentence that your students want your full attention on could probably work as well. And the way that I do it, and I actually have this exercise for you to solve it right now, is fill in the blank with the word or phrase that most naturally completes the phrase. All right. So you over there have a few words: abandoned, commercial, doubtful, endurance. And there's a type over there. It should say a guarantee. Okay. So what should be the answers? Let's see over here. You can number them and then type them in the chat really quickly. I'm going to check the chat right now, so you can probably write the number and tell me which is number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right. Do we have any answers? So here, I just want to clarify, okay, that I have combined different words or different lexical items as well, as you can see over here. Most of them are adjectives, but you can also mix it with other words too, okay? Then, what is the next thing that you want to have after they do this? Okay, guys, so you control that. You tell them, perfect, you completed this first task. Now, I want you to write down a complete sentence with that phrase. And here comes those critical thinking skills that I told you, because a few of these phrases could probably go right at the beginning of the sentence. Some other phrases could probably go right after or probably right at the end of the sentence. Some others could probably go right after the verb. Okay, so those are the kind of critical thinking skills that you also want to encourage in your students. Thank you so much for the answers. Doubtful, commercial, guarantee, endurance, and abandon. Let's check them out. Okay, doubtful, commercial, guarantee, endurance, and abandon. Yes, so you have them right, a complete sentence. Of course, I'm not going to do that exercise right here, but that's also another important thing, okay, that you keep in mind, that your students have to feel, you know, like not forced to write a complete sentence, but you let them know, okay, now you know how to complete this phrase. Now you know where these collocations go. Now, you know, why don't you dare write a complete sentence using those phrases, okay? Of course, you can make it even more complex by having them write I don't know, an article, write a paragraph with using all these phrases, certainly. But right now, let's stick to just the sentence level, okay? So students can actually write that, and they feel motivated to do it just by, you know, bringing this challenge or getting this challenge to the next level. Then I know that whenever you get to see this technique, it's like, okay, scrambled sentences. Wow, this is brand new, right? I mean, it's from probably 2 centuries ago. And it's actually a technique that was born in other areas like literature and stuff like that. And definitely you're right. Okay, scrambled sentences is something that we have used for I don't know how many years already in the field of ELT, but it's always a very good chance for you to, or it's always good to remember that when it comes to scrambled sentences, there are a few tweaks and tricks that we can make with them, and we need to consider them as well. So something that I really love about this is that up to a certain point, you can gamify it. You can make it a game. So students feel somewhat kind of pressured, kind of challenged to complete it in a certain amount of time. Okay, so they have some allotted time to complete them, and you let them do the exercise. Okay. Another important thing that I really love about it is that it doesn't really matter the kind of or the size of the class that you have, because you can perfectly adapt it, whether it's a very small class, maybe 10 to 12 students, or maybe 30, 35, 40, 50 students. I'm actually right now teaching a 50 student course. It's a TOEIC preparation course, but again, there are a lot of students. So if I just get to think about this, I can definitely adjust it. Okay, I can have students work in groups. Certainly, you need to consider that the larger the groups, the less opportunities that they have to, or the like less opportunities that they have to practice this. So you just need to consider that as well. But then again, it's super important to keep in mind that you can adjust it and you can make it yours. And another important thing is that once again, students are, thinking about the ways to combine all these words, how are they all put together, and like the best way to write a sentence. Okay, so that's super important too. Now, sometimes it gets a little complicated to prepare this, but the positive side about that, because it's kind of time consuming, the positive side about it is that you can pretty much have a bank of all of these chunks that you're doing, and then you just pretty much assemble something really quickly right before the class. And that's something that you can bring it, or that you can bring to the classroom, or that you can probably use any of the tools that we have online, whether it is Kahoot or Mentimeter or Socratic, stuff like that. Okay. Now, the negative side about this is that students are not really writing. Okay, students are just playing around with pre-cooked food. Okay, they're just opening the can of soup, and then they're just putting it in the microwave. Well, not in the microwave. So they're just opening the can of soup, and they just toss it into a bowl or a pan, sorry, and then they just heat it, and that's it. So the same happens with this. Okay, they're not quite writing, if you get to see it from that perspective. Okay, and on top of that, the things that they're actually writing down are not original. So that's probably one of the negative sides about it. But then again, okay, you cannot really discredit it. Now, how do I do this? And this is important just to notice this. Okay, the way that I do it, or at least the way that I have seen it, is that teachers, and especially new teachers, sometimes commit one of the biggest mistakes when it comes to preparing this material. Okay, and that is separating all items individually. Okay, all sentence items individually. So that means that I'm going to have a, then slash, then grade, slash deal, slash, like that. And that definitely will increase the difficulty of what students are writing. I mean, I don't want to sound rude or anything like that, but even sometimes might have a difficult time to, solve it in just one single sentence. So this definitely might be a little time consuming for your students if they're not in advanced levels or in more advanced levels. Okay, so in order for you to solve that problem or that difficulty, so that your students don't find it somewhat cumbersome, what you can do is just leaving, let's call them collocations again, so that your students know that, okay, it's all of this chunk together that I'm going to be moving all along in this sentence. So in this case, we have phrases like a great deal of, deciding on, in a job offer. So by, putting together phrases, that's better, okay? Or putting together words to form phrases, that's better. So you leave them there. Your students know that that's exactly the chunk of information that they will be moving around within the sentence. Now, once again, people, I don't want to emphasize like any tool that you might use, like, I don't know, Google Docs or Kahoot or anything like that, because that depends on you. That depends on the kind of setting and classroom that you have. There's something in the chat. I just want to check it. A great deal of, oh, yeah, Nasiba. Thank you. You're helping me solve it. Okay, so why don't we try to solve all these three sentences, people? A great deal of requires deciding on, careful, a job offer. It even sounds like English, right? Like almost like English. So you can write the answers over here, people. Okay, this is somewhat challenging. Okay, I have to clarify it. This type of exercise is probably for a more advanced English class. Your students have to definitely be familiarized with maybe the very basics of academic English. So I'm just checking the time right now. It's definitely something. It's my worst enemy right now. So I will quickly go with these sentences. Deciding on a job offer requires a deal of careful thought. Then, okay, sometimes people who have implemented healthy diets go back to bad habits. Yes, exactly, Nasiba. And the last one. Okay, research shows that students who use specific strategies do better on tests. Okay, so this is the way that I usually make this exercise or carry out this activity with my students. Notice, people, that you can definitely bring it to the next level, having them, I don't know, write an essay or something like that, but that's a different story. Okay, then really quickly, people, I just want to finish this presentation because it's almost time. Students need to write good sentences, definitely. Students definitely need to write good sentences. But most important than, or more important than that, students need to start writing because they're just getting behind. And what you need to do with your class, again, is just to let them go and start writing something, start writing their sentences. And I know there's always time to start checking on, punctuation and stuff like that. I know that there's time for that. But at the lowest level, at the most simple task that they can do, our students need to start writing sentences. Okay. And to me, people, I think that once the students have the freedom to, start playing with different elements, like we got to see in the first exercise, students find it that it's not that complicated to start writing complete sentences and grammatically accurate sentences as well. And what you need to do too is to balance activities that allow for a variety of answers, and activities that also have one or a few clear answers as well. Okay, so they don't have to be that complicated, as I was just mentioning in the previous task too, that what you can do to leave all these sentences like somewhat easy to solve is that you put together words to form phrases. Okay, so collocations, again, it's another important element that you need to consider. All right, so this is pretty much what I get to do with my writing classes, people. Again, you get to adapt them to the tool, to your preferred tool. Okay, and I guess it's right now question time, in case that there are.
Yes, exactly, Roni. So thank you very, very much, for such nice presentation. Like, you shared so wonderful insights. And right after today's webinar, next week we'll be sharing your presentation and posting them on our website so people will have access to them. So thank you very much. And now it's time for the question and answer session. So dear participants, please use the chat box to write your questions. And also those who are watching us on Facebook, you can also just leave your questions in the comment box. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. And I apologize to all the audience. Probably you heard my little puppy right now. She's usually barking just because. So I'm sorry. Okay, she's right next to me right now, and I'm just rubbing her head. Okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So feel free to ask any question, people. I'd be very, very glad to help with that. Let's see. I think there's thank you, Ronnie. Oh, okay. There's a thank you message there. That's a very good question. How do you help your students love writing? Ooh, that takes a while. Honestly, up to this point, I would say that probably the one the you know the one thing that has helped me is letting them write whatever they want, as long as I set up like clear guidelines. Okay, so I just tell them, okay, it must have 10 to 12 sentences. For example, if it's kind of a paragraph, it should be correctly punctuated. If you don't know how to use punctuation, just write simple sentences. Okay, that's what I usually tell them. Okay, simple sentences, and make sure that you add a period right after each one of them. And it's a free topic. Okay, so right now, for example, here on this side of the world, something that's very common is TikTok right now. So recently I had, and unfortunately I didn't take a screenshot of that. I recently had my students write, as I said, 10 to 12 sentences about their favorite TikTokers. And I thought, okay, let's see what happens. A lot of them actually wrote beautiful paragraphs about their TikTokers. I mean, you get to see the TikToker, and the TikToker is just a crazy person doing a lot of crazy things in front of the camera, but they know their lives and stuff like that. So they wrote, okay, so the TikToker crazy boy, okay, his actual name is Marcus Dupree, for example. And then they start telling, this, he was born there, he likes this and that. I don't know. My students definitely love that, but whenever they're just imposed, whenever they have no freedom over the things that they have to write about, that's exactly when I lose my students. That's exactly the moment when my students just feel bored. They don't want to do anything. Their sentences are or have a lot of glitches. I mean, you name it. Okay, there are a lot of problems that they have. So mostly my students will write beautiful sentences and will feel motivated to do so when the topic is free, or at least you give them a list of interesting topics or trendy topics that are hot right now, and then they get to pick one out of those. Okay, that also works too. What are the challenges in teaching writing in multi-level classes, and how do you cope with them? That's a very good question. Honestly, with the techniques that I showed today, which are just 3, I usually get to cope with those, but you definitely need to adapt them to the type of level that you have. Like, for example, in the first task that we saw, okay, in which students had to pick 5 words, you kind of limit the category. So you just write, let's say, adjectives, or let's say pure conjunctions, for example, and you let your students break their heads. Do you always use the common writing criteria to assess students' work, or you use some of your own strategies to help students see how they can produce a better writing piece? I usually go with the second one, Gulnara. I don't really get to use like conventions, like or specific rubrics for that, like the Common European Framework or stuff like that, because that's not really the standard that we get to use here. We're familiar with them. We try to encourage them, or at least in my case, I try to encourage that in my students, in my teacher, my student teacher students, sorry, in my students that I have who will become teachers eventually. So in their case, they definitely have to know what the Common European Framework is, or as you say, the common writing criteria, okay? Like different skills that they are supposed to achieve. But I don't usually go with one specific thing. I just prefer to delimit a set of guidelines that adapt just for one specific topic, rather than having something that's more global. I don't know if anyone else has another question. My favorite activity with collocations definitely is, what are you? Okay, just hold on. What assessing content is writing? Oh, assessing content in writing is definitely very difficult. That's I don't know, that's probably a whole semester just on that, right? How to assess writing. Definitely it takes a while. Something that I have seen or that I have experienced is that if you have a large class, it's almost impossible to go picky with your students and with their writings. You definitely want to go on to the holistic side of checking something, okay? Just reading and then assigning a whole group of criteria, rather than being very specific, telling the student, okay, these are the things that you need to improve, or I noticed that you're kind of failing on this or that. Instead of that, you just go with a holistic rubric, and that's all. Okay, that's all the criteria that you give. But then again, if your students are, you know, taking that specific course because they have to take a test, that makes it more complicated. What is your favorite activity with collocations? Yeah, Luda, the one that you got to see in this test, definitely, it's the one that I prefer. Okay, they usually have the blank. They just have to add the collocation into that phrase. But the next challenge is just to have them write a sentence. So definitely you can escalate this too, right? You start with the first activity by having students just pick 5 words and then placing them, and then you go, or you bring them into the next level and having them write sentences. It's definitely something that helps. How do you help students with that? Well, what are your effective exercises you usually use in the classroom? Yeah, these 3 activities that you saw today, they have proved to me that they work with mostly any kind of level. Okay, what are sorry, how do you develop creativity in writing? That's another difficult thing, people. Unfortunately, at least the you know, the theory that I have seen, that I have studied, and that I have noticed in my students is that only by reading they can acquire, or they can foster creativity in their minds in order for them to write. And of course, there are other implicit or other, let's call it, side effects that come after reading, like, for example, getting to know punctuation marks, or correct use of punctuation marks, getting to know, like, the semantics of something in some cases, because that's another important thing, keeping the semantic meaning of something. Like in the first exercise, if you saw it, sorry, not in the first exercise, but in this sentence that you have over there, if you read it, sentence number 1, a great deal of requires deciding on careful a job offer. It sounds like, it almost sounds like English, but then if you just go on the semantic side of the sentence, maybe you're not really saying anything. But grammatically speaking, you get to see that most of the pieces kind of, you know, fall into place. But then again, the semantic meaning is something that you don't get. So that's a reason why, to me, I believe it's only through reading that they can get that creativity, that they can definitely foster it. Now, when it comes to reading, of course, you have extensive, intensive reading. You assign the books, or you let them choose from a list of books. It's definitely another semester of different classes and courses that we could take here, and that's the only way that I have seen that it's definitely easily fostered in our students. how do you, oh, sorry, that's the same question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Roni. It has been very, very interesting webinar. And I'm sure, like, you know, people who will be watching this webinar tomorrow and, you know, the following days, they will enjoy it as well as we did. And of course, we also convey our gratitude to all those who are actively engaged in the English Without Borders, the webinars and regular participate. So big thank you to all of you. Yeah, so using this moment, I would like, yes, once again to say a big thank you to you, Roni, for your wonderful presentation and, like, you know, good exercises you provided during your webinar. So thanks a lot. And yeah, wishing you all the best and hope that our collaboration will continue and will be fruitful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you to you all, people. Thank you for being here. Thank you for asking questions, and I hope that they can work. Okay. You're also, I forgot to write down my email here, but I will probably share it later with the you know, the people who are leading this project, and probably they will share it with you later in case that you have extra questions, further questions. Okay. Or in case that you just want to say hi from the other side of the world, I'm here. Okay. I'm in this teeny tiny country saying hi to you all and saying that we're all in this together. We're teachers who don't have all the answers yet. We're still solving things. We're still helping the world be a better place.